Stacy Kehren Idema is the visionary founder and managing director of the wealth tech platform Equity. In this episode, Stacy shares her unique journey from escaping the pressures of her family business to navigating the emotional complexities of the corporate world. Stacy's experiences have uniquely positioned her to create Equity, a platform aimed at helping family offices align their values and investments, fostering secure communication across generations. Stacy opens up about the pivotal moments that shaped her path, including 2 life-altering accidents and a bold move to London in 2020. We'll delve into the intricacies of generational wealth transfer, the evolving landscape of values and investments, and the transformative role that AI has played in the finance sector. Stacy also shines a light on the significant impact that women are making in innovation and finance, and shares her insights on the challenges and triumphs of being a female founder. Listen in as Stacy discusses the importance of purpose-led investing, emotional intelligence in business, and her proactive approach to engaging with her audience. As always, if you find value from this content, please like and subscribe. Now here's my conversation with Stacy Kehren Idema. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas, and this week, my guest is the founder and managing director of Equity, Stacy Kehren Idema. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us what Equity is and how it gets started?
Yeah, absolutely. So Equity is a wealth tech platform. It's designed to help family offices align their values, not only the family values, but the individual values of those in the family that have influence, and really leverage those values and their investment thesis to their alternative investments. So helping them bridge that gap between the generations, creating some common themes and some common threads in the what we call traditional values to the more modern values, and helping them see that through line, as well as creating the space to communicate in a secure way.
Okay. And so how'd you come up with the idea for this?
Great question. It has been a heck of a journey, but the core of it takes me back to my own roots of being in family business. And frankly, as many do, run away from it, which is what I did. And I spent almost 27 years in corporate. And after that venture, I ended up back in entrepreneurship and a trip to London with really the opportunity to explore what's next, and really dove into the world of venture capital and understanding the differences between female-led businesses and male-led businesses getting funded. And that led me down a lot of research and a lot of understanding of what the challenges were beyond what people really believe that they are. And there could be a whole separate podcast actually on that. But ultimately, Equity came from really this marriage of my corporate experience, my family business experience, and my deep, deep desire to help call it the future generations invest in the way that they desire. And it's not uncommon for family offices and family businesses to invest in things that are more purpose-led and purpose-driven. How can we do that leveraging technology, and also helping remove some of those emotional biases that happen in that investment process, which I know I experienced sitting at our kitchen table / accounting table, because that's how our business was. But it's really the marriage of my personal and professional experiences. And again, this deep desire to help businesses carry on the legacy and do it in a smart and intelligent way that is not detrimental, as it often is, to families in that next generation.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll get into more of the product and the tech and what you do.
Yeah,
I just want to go into something you said too. You said you grew up in a family business with,
yeah.
entrepreneurial parents, and that caused you to run away from it. And, so many people too have this idea that entrepreneurship is so glamorous and so much fun, and you have this freedom. And, certainly, right, there's aspects of that. But can you talk about some of the things you experienced growing up and what caused you to run away from that initially?
Yeah. So my dad was a generational business owner, third generation, and my mom was an entrepreneur. And at that time in the 80s was, you didn't find them a lot. So our entire our entire life was wrapped around business. It was there when we woke up in the morning. It was there when we went to bed at night. Um, Kitchen table, if there wasn't silence, it was business. It was either what happened during the day, what customer was going to happen the next day, what needed to happen at night, because us kids were often involved in preparation. So my dad was a mason. And so oftentimes his mornings and evenings were spent preparing to go to the job site or to drive X amount of time away, which then required us being part of that. So we had to grow up faster than what probably most normal kids did. Business came first, pleasure came second. Um, and so for me, it was this thought that I could escape that if I went into corporate, that I could enjoy life a little bit more, that there would be less responsibility, that there would just be more life to live because everything seemed like it was so wrapped around the business that it was just hard to be.
Ah, okay. And what was your corporate experience like?
Very similar, in fact. The pains and challenges that I thought that I was running away from, I found not at a kitchen table, but at a conference table. There was still the personal aspects. You- um, I grew up with this, at least in my very early career, that I was supposed to show up and not bring home into business. And yet you still found those themes that carried through the people. Somebody was sick at home, and you can't dismiss that when you go to work. So I spent countless times in conference rooms or boardrooms or small offices having some really difficult conversations with some of the executives with whom I reported to. Just wandering through personal dynamics on teams and the emotional elements that played in, their own challenges, and having the responsibility that they had at those levels, and just navigating not only their personal life but with business. So it really taught me how business is always personal. I think that's probably one of the biggest through lines through all of that, and that the more that we get to talk about what's happening, us as whole humans, business and personal, the the more that you see the human in people, but the more that you actually get to the root of what's the challenge, and oftentimes it's not what you think that it is. And then on the other side of that, you get to see people thrive. So when you repress things and you don't have those conversations about it, that's when other things start to erupt from that. So it while I saw the same, I really started to see the through lines of, regardless of business, how we're just humans, and how we show up one way is how we show up every way. So yeah, it was quite it's quite a interesting lesson to steer left from and then basically run right into.
Okay. And so how can you talk about like when you came up with the idea for equity and you realized that you wanted to do this and you made the jump? There's a story there too where you sold everything and you went all in. Can you just talk about how you came to that decision, what that was like?
Yeah. So through a life change at end of 2020, so back to my family business experience and then my corporate experience. When I was in corporate, I always had this fire for something different, especially seeing the same things. I always had this desire to do business in a really different way. And so in 2020, with some life change and the curiosity to just go to another country and explore, I did that in 2021 and loved it so much here in London that I decided I wanted to stay longer. And so I secured an innovator visa, which required me to start a new business. And so I went back to the States, I sold everything and started a new business at the beginning of 2020, which was the Global Collective. And as part of that journey, the original idea around that was to create an ecosystem helping male-led businesses invest in female-led founders. And in that journey, I kept hitting a brick wall. And so in April of 2023, I went back and started all over again and worked with a business designer to take the elements that I knew were still real and to embed technology, which was always part of that play, and started to do more research and then actually return to my roots of family business and how could I leverage that thing that I ran away from that still is inherent in me today. And through that journey and those research and that business design birthed equity. And that's where I went back to not focused on VCs, but on family offices and really that purpose-led, that passionate impact focus of really creating a different world, being more purpose-led, being more inventive and innovative, especially as we really are starting to get into the early years of the great wealth transfer, where not only are more than 60% of the benefactors going to be women, some of the greatest innovations that are coming through now are actually designed and developed by women because they have such a huge purchasing power that most don't recognize. And so it's this beautiful inner mix of everything that I'm passionate about and my business experience. So selling everything felt like a no-brainer. It was just that fire that was always in me was definitely ignited. And it was everything said yes. So I just kept following my intuition. And don't get me wrong, there's been a few moments that I've sat back and I'm like, oh, what the heck did I just do? Especially doing this, and even the business model around it is different. Being very focused on bootstrapping. So I've been self-funding and really that my plan B became my plan A. And there is no more plan B. So it's been a lot of trust in myself and trusting that fire and that intuition that got me to where I am today.
Okay. And also earlier too, you mentioned the difference between male-led businesses and female-led businesses in terms of securing funding. Can you talk about your experience, particularly as a female founder, and what that's been like in terms of growing business?
Yeah. So as a female founder, there's all sorts of statistics that support that female-led businesses are more difficult, have a more difficult challenge. I actually like to flip that on its head and call it an opportunity. But for me, as a female founder with the intent to secure investment at some time, at some point, and in the initial stages of the first business, I was doing a lot more of that. A a lot of it becomes how do I look at that investor and determine if they're right for me? And I say that because most women will go at it. Well, I shouldn't say it's just exclusive to women, but there's a lot of what they call spray and pray. So you just go out and you just dump on everybody. And what I've learned through this journey, me as a woman, I need to stand up for myself, which is a really different mindset for a lot of women. It's hey, I have this really cool innovation, or I have this new product or this new service, invest in me because I'm a female founder. If I flip that on its head and say that I'm looking for investment and I'm investable, and I'm also very confident in what I do, regardless of my gender. So it's I think my journey to investment has been a little different than many because I flipped everything on its head. And there are also other biases that come into play. And this could be another podcast episode, but it's there's no but. It's actually been a bigger personal development journey through that to get investment and to consider what are alternatives to being invested, that I had never considered before. So it's a great question. I don't have probably the answer that many are looking for on how difficult it is. I have more of a story on what it is that I get to flip upside down to make that journey easier and better for me, to find the investors that will be ideal for me and for this business.
In my world, a personal brand is invaluable. A year ago, Easy DC was brand new with just a couple of customers and no online presence. Then I found Hicks Marketing. They helped me amplify my personal brand, build a solid content strategy, publish my podcast, and 10x the number of customers we serve, all in less than 1 year. Do you need a marketing partner who gets you and cares about your success? Reach out to Alicia at hicksmarketing.com for more info and tell her Dave Goulas sent you. So it sounds like, too, you've taken the challenge of it being much more difficult to secure funding, but also changing that paradigm to where, like, the investor's got to be right for you, and you're not going to accept someone that doesn't align with your values and where you're trying to take this company.
Yeah. And that required a lot of stepping back to all the no's that I got and not internalizing them. And because that's what we as women do. We make ourselves wrong and then we blame it on other people, when in truth, they're just not the right person for us. So how can we just say no, thank you, and move on? And or even possibly take that no and turn it into a yes. What might that look like, especially if we believe that investor could potentially be an ideal investor? How do we take that no and flip it upside down, instead of taking that no as face value, if you will, and then walking away and judging them and ourselves for it?
Okay. And another thing, too, I saw that you do on social media, which I really like and respect, is you do the weekly founder update, where you do just a personal video and you just tell the story of this is what the week was like.
Yeah.
And kind of the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever's going on and what you're doing next. Like, how long have you been doing that?
Probably on and off for 6 to 8 months. Some
Okay.
days the weeks pass so quickly, I kind of forget I kind of forget. But yeah, probably 6 to 8 months.
And what made you decide to start doing that?
Because I found that there were so many people that were really interested in what I was doing. And anyone can be interested, right? You can look at somebody and not know what else to say and say, "Oh, I'm really interested." However, what I found is, especially when I reset and restarted and got very focused in what I was doing and birthed equity at the latter part of last year, that when I started really digging into the roots of where I came from and it resonating more, it feeling more authentic. Before, I think it was feeling more, I was really pushing something. It was like shoving a square peg into a round hole. What I found is that people are like, "Oh, you know what? I want to help you, and I want to also know when you're a little bit further along. I wanna know X, I wanna know Y." And so I thought, well, if I'm gonna put together an email newsletter, that's, to my email list and they can become part of it, but how do I also engage in a different way that allows them not only to see what's happening, but to get to know me a little bit more? Because I can do one-on-one and I love one-on-one or small group intimate settings. How can I communicate with a broader audience who send me messages and check in, who want to help, who want to be of service, who know that they can, but only at a certain point? So it was really this, okay, I get to now be a little bit more visible. I get to share what's happening. I don't have to keep it um, hidden, which is a really common thing that women do. We hide out until we're ready, and then not everyone has come along on the journey with us, and they're like, "Well, wait a second, what just happened?" So it became a lot easier to do. So I think that those were kind of the big incentives for it.
Okay. And I noticed too is like you share a lot of personal stuff too on social media.
Yeah.
In terms, was that like a big catalyst in terms of just kind of getting over that hump of maybe keeping everything in and just say, you know what, this is me. I'm just going to share it all, and the right people are going to connect.
Yeah. So that's a couple fold. One, so back to the family business. When I was little, one of the biggest challenges that I had was actually having and getting my voice heard, because there was so much talk about business that even my own personal needs of being able to communicate effectively were challenged. And so for years, I just thought if I kind of sat back behind the scenes, that eventually somebody would allow me to speak. What I didn't recognize or realize until much later in life is that it was my responsibility to speak up for myself. And so communication and emotional intelligence became a huge catalyst for me about 15 years ago. And through that journey, communicating with people on topics and subjects that I like to talk about, and back to the business is always personal. Um, yeah, I think those were probably the biggest catalyst for that. There's I've I've put myself through a lot, and I find that the more that I talk about it, the more that it resonates with people, and it makes it a little bit more personal.
Okay. Another thing too, I saw you shared recently was something most people don't know about me, and you talked about a couple accidents that were years apart, and just sounds like an insane story of the car, and can you just tell that story and kind of how that impacted you?
Yeah, so I had a pretty big accident in 2004. I slipped and fell and broke my tailbone and herniated 3 discs in a puddle of gas at the gas station. And so fast forward about 14 years, I started to have some really big some challenges. I had done everything but surgery. Well, I ended up in multiple surgeries, and one day I was post surgery in the physical therapist's office, lying on the bed doing PT, and I heard this loud bang, this loud crash. And I looked next to me, and there was a car that had crashed through the actual building itself. And it was truly a oh crap moment. Am I alive? I remember touching myself, going, "Am I alive or am I dreaming? What's happening here?" And then the smell of burnt rubber The gentleman must have had a stroke or a heart attack and passed out and barreled through 4 lanes of traffic down a hill into the building. And so he still had his foot on the gas pedal, and he was burning rubber of the tires. So it was a very surreal moment of, oh, I thought the surgeries were bad. This has just given me a total upgrade on, um, I'm alive and I'm grateful, and holy crap, anything could happen at any time.
Wow. So you missed being hit by that car by just a few feet.
Less than. It was 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
Wow. It sounds like that moment gave you like a new lease on life almost.
Yeah, it was um, I mean, when something like that happens and your adrenaline kicks in, I remember getting off the table and I remember being so worried about everyone else in there. Forget that there was, physical therapists in there taking care of, forget that there was emergency people there taking care of everybody. I was just checking in on everyone. And I remember going home that night going, oh, okay, well, this happened. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I feel strange. Like, this is probably one of the most surreal things in my life to have that just flash before your eyes. Um, and to see the person on the other side of the car who did have some minor injuries, but everyone walked away alive and healthy, and think, oh yeah, this any like really anything could happen at any time. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so now back with the equity and what you're doing. So I know you mentioned the great wealth transfer, and you speak a lot about that in terms of on your site and whatnot. Do you see like there being, because you mentioned sustainability and meaningful investment for these newer generations? Do you see there being somewhat of a disconnect between generations in terms of what the newer people value as opposed to maybe traditional investments from the formers?
Dave, that's a great question. From my interviews and my research and the reading, what I take from it is really a misunderstanding of values. And so what that means is there is some more traditional language that's used, even something like return on investment of a return on impact. Return on investment is purely for financial gains. Return on impact is for financial benefit, as well as impact in an area of interest. It could be anything in sustainability. It could be even deeper where you want to make an impact in climate or in underrepresented founders, in um, agriculture. So I think there's this misunderstanding and this misperception that there are many values that have an underlying theme regardless. It's how do you extrapolate from that and start to see that there is more in common than what you would imagine. For example, another example would be if an older generation values art and culture, and they invest in art, they may misperceive NFT as not being something that aligns with the values of the family. Well, NFT is a digital art. And so when you have different generations speaking different languages that are an evolution, a maturation, you can miss on what the perception is, and then miss on each other and what you think is of value to you. The other thing that's really important with this particular generational transfer is it's the first one that's digital. It's moving in a digital age. All the previous ones have been analog. And we're in such a space now that being in an analog world is not sustainable. Um, it would be like driving a car from the 1920s across the country and expect it to perform in a way that a hybrid car would would perform. They both serve a purpose, and then how do you find that through line to get to the other side to continue, in particular for family offices, to continue the legacy. So it really boils down to communication and the perception and the misperceptions that happen in that communication, the language, the nomenclature, things like that, that are evolving.
Okay. And so, like you said, this is the digital age now, the first time a transfer like this is taking place. And then the AI helps facilitate that transfer and like you said, take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, so there are going to be many things that technology will never do. And really technology gets to be the amplifier. It gets to be the amplifier, the accelerator, and it gets to really help businesses and family offices understand their data more. It gets to help them understand how they can create efficiency in what they do. So the AI can do really great things, and also being mindful of what it does and the information that you feed it to do what you want it to do. So it can remove some emotion, and also there's the other elements of actually working within the family units themselves to help them understand each other so that even the technology can work better. So technology will never replace emotion. It'll never be able to simplify emotion. We're complex beings, but we can certainly use it to our advantage in all sorts of ways.
Okay. And if people want to learn more about equity and get in touch with you to see how you may be able to help, what's the best way people can do that?
You know what? They can send me an email at stacy@equity.ai, EQUATI.ai, or send me a message on LinkedIn.
Okay. And we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone. So it's there. Okay. All right. Well, Stacy, thank you so much for taking time to be
Okay.
here this week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.